Georgia is still a very good football team. Anybody saying differently is just lying. But it's not as good as it's been the last couple of years. How big is that drop? We're going to discuss that and a whole lot more. Your scout of the Georgia Bulldogs here on a Wednesday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in, everybody. It's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys for being here, making Locked On Vols your first watch, your first listen here on a Wednesday morning, and hopefully every single day, you everydayers, you know what I'm talking about. Hey, I'm Eric Kane, and this is the place where we can talk Tennessee football, news, entertainment, and all that and more, about 30 minutes every single weekday morning. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And couldn't do it without our friends over at Game Time, where you can download the Game Time app, create an account, put in the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. All that and more, thanks to our friends over at Game Time. So we got two segments coming up with Josh Ward. We just kept talking. We just kept talking and talking. So we hit on a number of different areas, such as Nico's injury, injury reports, how they should be handled. Kind of where Tennessee is now compared to where it was entering this game in 2022, the differences, all that and more is coming up in segments 2 and 3 as we look ahead to Tennessee and Georgia with Josh Ward for Ward Wednesday. But first, here in segment number 1, I did want to kind of break bread here and kind of go over who Georgia is this football season. I think there's some misconceptions out there a little bit because, I mean, I'm guilty of it a little bit as well. Like, you think of Georgia and you're like, oh, great team. Great team. Best team in the world. Best team in the world. Why? Because that's been the standard the last couple of years. It's been Georgia, Alabama, Clemson a couple of years ago. Those were the standards. Georgia's not that football team this year, but also, I've also seen a lot of talk this week like saying, oh, Georgia's awful, Georgia's awful, Georgia's not awful. If you have friends, or maybe if it's you yourself, and I mean this with the nicest tone possible, you're crazy if you think Georgia's a bad football team. 7-2 overall, 5-2 in Southeastern Conference play. Okay, the difference for Georgia this year compared to Georgia of old, like take defense for example, it's slightly towards the top, but kind of middle of the road stats wise in the Southeastern Conference. It is a solid football team. It's just not ranked top 1, 2, 3, 4 nationally like you've been in years past. Case in point, defense, gives up 18.4 points per game. That's really good. That's 6th in the SEC. Total defense, it allows 306 yards per game. That's really, really good. That's 5th in the SEC. Passing defense, allowing 195 through the air. That's 6th in the SEC. Again, all these stats are good. I mean, credit to the league this year. Rushing defense allows 111 yards on the ground. That's 6th in the SEC. Really good third down defense, where Tennessee, I think, still leads the nation at like 22 or 23. You have Georgia that is at 28% defensive third down rate, which is really, really good. And they're really good in the red zone. Really good in the red zone, allowing only 11 touchdowns on 24 trips to the red zone. That is 45%. So, again, this is a sound, solid, really, really good unit. It's just not top 2, top 3 nationally like it's been the last couple of years. I'll get to offense here in a moment, but defensively, linebackers run the world in Kirby Smart's defense. Always has, always will. So these linebackers and C.J. Allen, former Tennessee recruiting targets. Small Munden, former Tennessee recruiting target. Those are your top 2 backers. Munden actually missed all of October with injury. He came back last week in that loss to Auburn, or Ole Miss, excuse me. He's back as far as I know, but he missed pretty much about a month. But he's a really, really good player. C.J. Allen tied for the team lead, 49 tackles, interception, TFL. Linebacker Raylan Wilson, 4.5 TFLs. He's going to play some. He played a whole lot when Small Munden was out. Your edge players, your outside linebackers, I mean, there's a bunch of them. Mikael Williams, 5.5 TFLs. Jalen Walker, team leading 4.5 sacks. 6.5 TFLs, Chaz Chambliss, 3.5 sacks, 5.5 TFLs, Damon Wilson, 3.5 TFLs, a sack, Tyron Ingram Dawkins, 3 sacks, 8 TFLs at the team high. I mean, those are your edge players, defensive end or outside linebacker edge players, those Leo type spots. They play a lot of guys and they keep them fresh, and kind of what Tennessee does on that side of the football. You go to the back end, Malachi Starks is a really, really good player, been there for a while. You know, he's an SEC veteran, 49 tackles, tied for the team lead, 4 TFLs, interception. Malachi Starks, great player. And then you've got some new guys. I mean, you got Dalen Everett. He's pretty good cornerback, got an interception. Justin Humphreys, 4 PBUs, got, doesn't have a pick, but has played some games. Ja'Cory Thomas has played some games this year. KJ Bolden, former Tennessee target in recruiting, he has an interception at safety. Somebody asked me, like, well, which defense is better, Tennessee's or Georgia's? And, I mean, Tennessee's defense statistically is better this year. But, like, if I look at the levels, like, you know, I'll take Tennessee's defensive front for sure because I love Tennessee's defensive front, even though I think Georgia's defensive front's pretty good. But I'll take Tennessee's defensive front. I'll take Georgia's linebackers because C.J. Allen, Small Munden are really, really good players, and they have been for years. Secondary is interesting. I'll take Tennessee's corners. I will take Georgia's safeties. I will take Tennessee's nickel player, which is Boo Carter, Christian Harrison. So very comparable defensively. Offensively, this is where things get a little bit interesting because Carson Beck, who was arguably a first-round draft pick if he would have left last year, is probably on pace to be a 4th or a 5th-round draft pick right now. I don't think we're making a big deal. Obviously, we're in the season, so the draft stock, it doesn't matter. That conversation can dominate the offseason, but we're not talking about how bad Carson Beck has hurt his draft stock this year. And I don't root for failure on anybody, don't hear me wrong, but, like, it's interesting because, you listen to certain interviews, you read certain articles, you say this guy talked to this scout, this guy talked to this NFL personnel, and they said, hey, he was number 1 on our board coming into the season. He's probably a 4th or a 5th-round pick right now. We'll see how all of that plays out, but it's interesting. Why? Well, Carson Beck's turning over the football at an alarming rate. 12 interceptions this year. Georgia overall, 14 turnovers in his last 6 games. Carson Beck, the overwhelming majority of those turnovers are coming from him. His offensive line has been battered and bruised. His offensive line has not been fantastic this year. I think that's contributed to him as well. He's still throwing for a ton of yards, 2,488 yards, 65% completion, so it's not like he's super inaccurate, 17 touchdowns. He's still going to throw it around the yard, guys. I mean, he's a good quarterback, and when he's protected and when he's on, I mean, there's a reason why people viewed him as a first-round pick. I mean, but this year you don't have all the toys to play with. You know, Georgia's never been super elite at the skill positions, but they've always had tight ends. Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington. What's his name? Grayson Pope back when I was a kid, man. I thought he was the baddest dude in the world. I think he was number 1 or maybe he was number 0. Big old guy, big old cowboy collar. His last name was Pope. I thought he was awesome. Just looking because he looked like a football player. But they've always had big tight ends. They've had some decent receivers in the past, like George Pickens, a really, really good player, of course. McConkey last year, so on and so forth. But, right now, just, I don't want to say average receivers, but no difference makers at receiver, even though Dylan Bell torched Tennessee last year. Running game has been not good because Georgia is 15th in the league. How about that? Try that on for size. Georgia is 15th in the league in rushing, averaging only 124 yards on the ground per game. That is just wild. Overall, Georgia's offense, 30.8 points per game. That's 7th in the SEC. 410 yards of total offense. That's 8th in the SEC. Passing offense, 286. That's 5th in the SEC. Rushing offense, 124 yards. That's 15th in the SEC. Third downs are at 38%. That's not fantastic. Red zone, they're scoring touchdowns at 67%. That could be a little bit higher, so that's not fantastic. But 15 turnovers. So again, stats are fine. Like they're not bad. Like not bad at all. So I think we should be careful with kind of how we talk about this week. Georgia obviously is just not dominant this year, and that's the difference. Georgia's a good football team. It's not a dominant football team this year. So can Tennessee take advantage? And will Nico play? Those are the answers I don't have right now. We'll just kind of have to see. You go to the game by game, boys and girls, and Georgia is turning over the football at an alarming rate. Weeks 1, 2, and 3, no turnovers for the Georgia offense. Week 4 against Alabama, 4 turnovers. No turnovers in a win against Auburn, 2 turnovers in a win against Mississippi State, 3 turnovers in a win against Texas, 3 turnovers in a win against Florida, 2 turnovers in a loss against Ole Miss. Obviously, Carson Beck on 2 separate occasions this year has thrown 3 interceptions in a single game. That is not a winning formula. So, Tennessee can take advantage. Somebody asked me this on the mailbag show yesterday. What's the difference in, going down there this year compared to 2022 or whatever? Well, Tennessee has an elite defense. Tennessee has what I believe should be a guy in the Heisman conversation in Dylan Sampson. Tennessee's offensive line is really good at run blocking. If you have a healthy quarterback, I think he can be a difference maker in this football game. But you got to handle everything else, the crowd, the procedural penalties, all that type of stuff. And we'll continue to talk about that as the week goes on. But Tennessee, on paper, this should be a heck of a football game. You need your quarterback. You need your quarterback. You need your quarterback. We've talked about that. We'll continue to talk about it as the week goes on. Hey, when we come back, we'll get into our conversation with Josh Ward. Little Ward Wednesday action coming up next here on your Wednesday Locked On Vols. Hey guys, I want to see about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is an app to where you can download and get tickets to events in your area. Sure, we're sports fans here. We're Tennessee fans. You wouldn't be listening to Locked On Vols if not. Games at Neyland Stadium. That UTEP game coming up here, week after next. You got games at the Food City Center for the Lady Vols and men's basketball team. Lindsey Nelson Stadium hosting your 2024 reigning national champion Tennessee baseball team coming up this spring. You can buy tickets to all those events on the Game Time app, but also concerts, comedy shows around Knoxville or the area that you live. The Bijou Theater, the Tennessee Theater, the Covenant Health Ballpark where the Smokies are going to play this spring. Buy tickets to those events on the Game Time app. And when you're there, you can use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account. Put in the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. You can download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Game Time. Josh, a lot to unpack from that 33-14 win over Mississippi State. And a lot of it doesn't even have to do with the game. Obviously, the storyline of the week entering your biggest game of the season against Georgia is injury, specifically to the quarterback position. As I said on the show yesterday, it's going to be a day-by-day thing. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but Josh Heupel seems pretty confident. What would you take away from Heupel's comments on Monday and even Saturday after the game regarding Nico Iamaleava?
Yeah, my takeaway post-game and then again on Monday was be careful about trying to read into what Josh Heupel says. I think Josh Heupel often attempts to say words that don't tell us anything, and that's perfectly fine if that's what he wants to do. Some coaches want to just tell you what's going on and are going to be more open, more transparent. Other coaches are going to hide as much as they can, and Josh Heupel's typical approach is to hide whatever he thinks he needs to. So Nico might start and play the whole game for Tennessee. He might not start. But saying that he'll be in great shape or that he was with the team on Monday morning doesn't mean anything for his status. And Josh did say, check out the availability report, which will come out Wednesday and then is updated each night until the weekend. And that's what I'm going to do. My guess is that Nico will be listed as questionable on Wednesday, which really won't provide us any more of an update on his status. But Josh Heupel did not say Nico will play on Saturday night, and he did not say that Nico will play on Monday. That keeps it as a question as of now.
Josh, what are the nobody in the SEC has been fined yet for injury reports, right?
Not that I'm aware of. Nothing that's been reported. No.
So why don't, if I'm Heupel, I'm going what Lane Kiffin does. Like I'm putting. Because, everybody's banged up at this point in the season. Nobody is 100%. I'm putting like 20 guys down there as questionable. And then another question for you, Josh, since clearly you have all the answers. Is game time decision an actual designation in these injury reports? Because I haven't seen one. Have you?
An actual game time decision, no. I would have to go back to the exact rules of it. I think if you're a questionable tag, that's 50-50. So if you're questionable on game day, then you're 50-50 to play, which means you could or you could not.
Okay. Well, I would, like for Nico, I would keep him questionable all the way up until kickoff. I would never change it. If If he was not going to play, I would not put doubtful. If he was going to play, I would not put probable. I would keep him questionable the entire way and treat it like, oh, well, we're going to give him one last test there before, they go out for pregame warmups, and here we go. Like, I don't know. Like, I would play some games a little bit if I'm Josh Heupel. I think Lane Kiffin does that, but so many times we're not getting that in these injury reports. But I would have him as questionable. I'd have Dante Thornton as questionable, Javonte Spraggins, John Campbell, who never even appears on the injury report, yet he only plays 25% of the snaps. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but I mean, in a game like this, in a week like this with Kirby, I mean, anything you have to give them to think about, I think, is an advantage.
Yeah, I mean, sure. It doesn't matter to me as much if you want to do that, if you don't. Again, every coach is different in how they want to approach it. Some coaches don't want to bother with it, and they just want to focus on the game and planning. I do think quarterback is different than a lot of positions. Like, put John Campbell Jr. on there if you want to. I'm not sure if John Campbell Jr. or Dane Davis is playing right tackle, that's going to approach how Kirby Smart is preparing his team for the game. And different people have different opinions on that too. So if they want to, fine. But at this point, we all know that John Campbell Jr. is expected to start, and we know that he's not going to play all 4 quarters all the way through, and that Dane Davis is going to play at some point. So, I would stick to guys that actually are questionable. If you have somebody is questionable on there, and then it's reported on Friday night or Saturday morning that, hey, he is going to play. If Pete Thamel comes out with a report on ESPN, I don't think a fine is coming, but I wouldn't want Greg Sankey's office to call with a reminder on Monday, hey, you need to be accurate with your report. So I would stick with whatever the truth is as much as you can. If somebody actually is questionable, put him as questionable on there.
Josh, such a stand-up guy from Farragut, man. He just took my silly little idea and said, all right, that's little kid stuff. Let's just keep it professional. If Tennessee has Gaston Moore playing quarterback, can Tennessee win in Athens?
Tennessee can. I won't be picking Tennessee if Gaston Moore is the starting quarterback, but I think the formula is still pretty similar with Gaston or Nico. It's just that I'm giving more upside to what Tennessee's offense can be with Nico's playmaking ability. I don't really need to explain that part, but your question is, can Tennessee win with Gaston at quarterback? I think the way Tennessee wins is the defense has to be terrific once again, as it has been pretty much all the way through this season. And it has to go in saying, okay, we need to continue this streak of holding our opponent under 20 points. And if we do that, maybe we set the offense up for a score. Maybe we go score some points. And if we can figure out a way to get to 14 to 20 points, then we give ourselves a chance to win. That's the mindset if I'm Josh Heupel trying to go win the game with Gaston Moore on the road. Tennessee can't turn the ball over and help out Georgia. Georgia's offense could use some help. So if Tennessee is able to do that and give Georgia some extra opportunities to score, the Bulldogs are going to win at home. But if Tennessee can take care of the football, again, this is the scenario if Gaston Moore is starting. If they can take care of the football, if the defense can play lights out, pressure Beck, and the defense and special teams can either score or help the offense have easier opportunities to score, then Tennessee can get out of there with the win. But I don't think Tennessee's going on the road with Gaston Moore and putting up a ton of points to win. It's going to have to be the defense leading the way. And then maybe Dylan Sampson is able to hit some plays for you too.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen all those things happen this year at points in times. I mean, the run game, of course, the elite defense where Tennessee's actually stopping the run. That hadn't happened the last 2 weeks, but Tennessee's been a great defense all year long. We've seen Tennessee protect the football at times this year. So, it's not like we haven't seen this team do any of that. So, if all that kind of goes together and your backup quarterback, I'm with you. Whereas I don't think Tennessee has to play a perfect football. Say Nico's playing. I don't think Tennessee has to play a perfect football game to beat Georgia, because I think Georgia's a good team, a solid team, an above-average team. Clearly, I think it's
for sure
one of the better teams in the SEC. However, it is not the top 2, top 3 national team that just won back-to-back national championships anymore. It's come down a little bit. Welcome to the rest of college football. So I think that Tennessee
2 years ago when Tennessee went to Athens, Tennessee had a great offense, right? Tennessee had the number 1 scoring offense in the country. But when they actually lined up on the field, Georgia up front was able to dominate a lot of the time on defense against Tennessee's offense. Remember, Tennessee backed up at the goal line. The Vols didn't really have a chance against Georgia. on the defensive side, Tennessee couldn't match Georgia's offense. There was no real advantage for Tennessee. There were some individual matchups, like Jalen Hyatt was a really good player, as the Biletnikoff Award winner. Tillman had been injured, remember that as well. But there were no real advantages. Tennessee's defense has a real advantage, I think, against Georgia's offense in this game up front. The way Ole Miss was able to dominate physically against Georgia's offensive line has to be what Tennessee is looking at, saying, we can do that too. We can go win up front. And we haven't had that conversation in quite a while about Tennessee against Georgia. We are talking legitimately about Tennessee's defensive line being able to go win up front against Georgia's offensive line. And to me, that is the number one talking point if we're talking about how Tennessee beats Georgia.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. You can go ahead and join at FanDuel.com. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every single moment more with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. It's also an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is the biggest game for Tennessee since Georgia 2022, and you can make the case that it's maybe even a bigger game. I mean, Tennessee and Georgia both playing for a spot in the SEC championship, both playing for a college football playoff, and that's kind of the same case here. I mean, potentially the SEC championship game, but stakes are high. This is probably the second, if it's not the first, meaning that 2022 game was #1. This is the second biggest game Josh Heupel's ever coached here, right?
Yeah, part of it is where it falls in the season in November, because the stakes rise when you have more of an opportunity. 2 years ago, Tennessee was the #1 team in the college football playoff ranking. It was just short-lived because of what happened in that Georgia game. So in that one, we found out Tennessee just wasn't ready. Tennessee was not ready for that level, meaning go play for the SEC and national championship. They were a very good team. They had a great season. Georgia was better. Nobody can dispute that. Georgia may prove to be better, may prove to obviously be better by the time they play those 4 quarters on Saturday. But in a 12-team playoff, Tennessee, with only 1 loss, right now has a chance to go beat Georgia on the road. And if that happens, Tennessee is in a driver's seat position to go play for an SEC championship. And at that point would be competing for a national championship going into the college football playoff. That's a real opportunity. So this game for sure is right up there. The Alabama games have been huge. They come earlier in the season, so the stakes are higher now because of what's on the table for Tennessee to accomplish. But what you've done affects how the next game is viewed. So because they beat Alabama earlier this season, because of what this program has been able to do the last few years and the position they're in now, there's an easy case to be made right now that this is the biggest game Josh Heupel's had at Tennessee, because if the Vols win, everything's on the table for this team, an SEC title and a chance to go compete for a national title.
Out the door, Josh, I do want to ask you one question, and I recognize we're recording this before Tuesday night's college football playoff rankings come out, so I want to get that out there. I had a quick reaction to that already on the stream, so you guys can go check that out. If Tennessee were to lose this game and finish 10-2, or if Tennessee wins this game and loses to Vanderbilt, however it is 10-2, well, I guess it would matter because of who you lost to. Mm-hmm. Is that a good enough record to get Tennessee in the college football playoffs? I mean, everybody is loving Alabama right now. There are Bud Elliott's, there's Heather Denich's out there saying that Tennessee's head-to-head just doesn't matter over Alabama. It just doesn't matter. I recognize Tennessee's strength of schedule is not good because Oklahoma, NC State, those teams let you down. I know that Arkansas loss is not something that's great. But I mean, we can spend it any way we want, right? Like Ole Miss has the worst loss of any team contending in the college football playoffs right now. Tennessee beat that team by 10, but Georgia has 2 losses, but Georgia's 2 losses are 2 pretty good teams. I mean, again, 10-2. I think it would come down to Josh and tell me again. We'll get clarity on this Tuesday night. 5 teams from the SEC or 4 teams from the SEC. What do they value? Head-to-head, strength of schedule. Mm-hmm. We just don't have these answers yet. But 10-2, does Tennessee get in?
Yeah, one thing I would love to know is how many spots are available for SEC teams, because we know there are 7 at-large spots, but how many are going to be open for the SEC? Miami losing this past weekend, I think, helped, because a fearful situation was, what if SMU wins out, beats an unbeaten Miami team in the ACC title game? They both get in. Notre Dame right now is in a good position to get one of those spots, but you're more asking about Tennessee versus these other SEC teams. I'd love to know, is Nico playing? If Tennessee loses a competitive game without Nico, maybe that helps Tennessee's case, where they could say, yeah, we lost a big game on the road. Our defense kept us in it. What if we had Nico? We could have won the game.
Yeah, but then quarterback controversy, Josh.
The quarterback part is, it's a head scratcher, because 2 years ago, this is brought up. 2 years ago, Alabama was 1 spot ahead of Tennessee in a 4-team playoff, so it didn't ultimately matter for a playoff position. But Hendon had been lost for the season. Tennessee was not the same team. We know that. The committee will tell you, if you don't have your quarterback, we don't view you the same. They said that to Tennessee 2 years ago. They said that to Florida State a year ago. That one, they did say it out loud for the playoff. So they view your team with or without your quarterback differently. But Tennessee against Ole Miss, I think it's going to have a tough case if it's a 2-loss team, having just lost to Georgia right after Ole Miss destroyed Georgia. And you're right about Ole Miss's home loss to Kentucky. It was at night. I don't think they're going to give Tennessee much of a break for the loss at Arkansas, even though it was a close one. So I think it's really complicated, and the head-to-head part should help Tennessee against Alabama. But I'm also very confident they're not going to look at that alone. And Oklahoma and NC State have done Tennessee no favors, because at the start of the season, Tennessee expected those would be quality wins if they could go get them in September, and they turned out to not mean anything really for Tennessee, and that hurts. But it's the reality of it. So I think Tennessee is still in a good position if it loses a competitive game at Georgia. If Tennessee goes down to Athens and loses by multiple scores, and it's similar to the game 2 years ago where it's just obvious which team is ahead of the other, then I'm not going to like Tennessee's chances. If Tennessee plays a competitive game and loses and finishes 10-2 and wins somewhat impressively against Vanderbilt on November 30th, I like Tennessee's chances to get in. But if Tennessee loses this Saturday, then Tennessee is leaving it up to the opinions of others, and that can be very dangerous.
I think it should be head-to-head. I think it should be strength of schedule. I think it should be quality wins versus bad losses. That's kind of my criteria, but nobody asked me. Also, and we do not have the answer to this until we see it play out, because it's going to play out this year. You know, a 2-loss SEC championship team, appearance team in the game.
Yeah.
You lose and get that 3rd loss. I mean, you cannot, in my opinion, punish that team for playing an extra game. That's not fair. So, I think the 2 teams are in no matter what. But, I mean, again, we just have to see.
Yeah, and I'll add this very quickly. I think one thing that they will consider in these head-to-heads, and this is partly an eye test description, but they will look at how these 10-2 teams look at their best. And I think that's going to help Alabama, because Alabama at its best has a quarterback that looks like he's the best in the country. Jalen Milroe against Georgia, Jalen Milroe against LSU. Now, when he didn't play well in Knoxville against Tennessee, and Tennessee's defense should get credit for that, that's a problem. But I think they'll also come back to, okay, at your best, because that's what you have to be to go win a national championship, how do you look? And that's why I think Tennessee's offense needs to show a little bit more here in the next few weeks.
True, but again, defense can be sexy. Nobody wants to admit it. At your best, Tennessee defense is lights out, and nobody takes defense into an account. But I understand offense sells tickets, and it's exciting.
I'm with you. I think some of the concern from Tennessee fans' mood has come from the offense not being as exciting, despite the defense being as exciting as we've seen in a long time.
Yeah. Josh, a lot going on this week. What do you guys got coming up, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on Josh and Swain?
Yeah, we're covering a little bit of this Georgia game coming up on Saturday. Swain, he went 2-0 down in Athens, and that was high-level Georgia football with Mark Richt at the time competing for SEC championships then. So a lot on Tennessee, Georgia, how the offense will play with or without Nico, and what the defense needs to do to continue to cause problems for Carson Beck. And we'd love for you to check out the Josh and Swain newsletter. It will go live. It's free on Friday morning.
And you can get a link to that newsletter in the show notes of this episode right now. Josh, as always, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Eric.
little extended version, Award Wednesday. Josh Ward, he is the co-host of Josh and Swain on 99.1 The Sports Animal. You guys can check it out on your radio dials, noon to 3 weekdays, and every single Wednesday right here on Locked On Balls. Had somebody come up to me at Neyland Stadium this weekend and say, "Hey, what's up, Kaner? Love Ward Wednesday. Love that you continue to bring him on the show, and I'm glad that he makes the time to do it every single Wednesday because it's one of my favorite segments." So we'll continue to react to Tennessee's rankings in the college football playoff installment here in week 2. We'll look at Tennessee, Georgia, have a crossover show on Thursday. We'll get Boogie on Friday. We got still a whole lot more to get into this week as Tennessee prepares for Georgia. No better place to get ready for the game than right here on Locked On Balls.